Everyone in my husband's family called me a gold digger. They said it at the dinner table like it was a joke. They whispered it in the kitchen when they thought I couldn't hear. They even said it to my face once, smiling like they were doing me a favor by warning their precious son about me. But here's the part they didn't know. The house we were sitting in, the roof over their heads, the place they kept calling their son's home, it was in my name. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. My name is Sophia, and this is the story of how I went from being the family joke to the person who held all the power without ever raising my voice. I married Ethan when I was 26. He was kind, soft-spoken, and nothing like his parents. His mother, Linda, had this way of looking at me like she was scanning a price tag. His father, Robert, barely spoke to me unless it was about money, work, or contributing to the family. From day one, I could feel it. They thought I married up. They thought I needed their son. They thought I needed their lifestyle. What they didn't know was that before I ever met Ethan, I had already built my own life. I worked in real estate development. I saved every bonus, every commission. I invested quietly. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag. I just planned. When Ethan and I decided to move in together, his parents insisted we stay in the family house. They said it was temporary. They said it would help us get on our feet. What they really meant was they wanted to keep an eye on me. So I smiled. I thanked them. I moved in. Every morning, Linda would comment on my clothes. Every night, Robert would ask Ethan if I was pulling my weight. At family gatherings, someone always joked about how lucky I was to marry into a good home. I kept my mouth shut because I knew something they didn't, and I was waiting for the right moment to let them find out. Living in that house felt like walking on glass. Every step I took, every word I said, somehow became proof to them that I didn't belong there. Linda would accidentally forget to save me a seat at dinner. Robert would talk over me whenever I tried to join a conversation. Even Ethan's younger sister, Megan, started treating me like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Ethan noticed, but he didn't know how deep it went. "Just ignore them," he would whisper at night, when the house was quiet and the walls felt like they were listening. "They'll come around." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But it got worse. One afternoon, I came home early from work and found Linda and Megan sitting at the kitchen table, going through my mail. They froze when they saw me like kids caught stealing cookies. "Oh," Linda said quickly, sliding a folder toward her. "We thought this was Ethan's." It wasn't. It was a bank envelope. My bank. I smiled and took it back without a word, but my hands were shaking all the way up the stairs. From that day on, I locked everything. My laptop. My files. Even my phone. Not because I was hiding something, but because I was tired of being treated like something that needed to be inspected. At Sunday dinner that week, Robert raised his glass and made a toast. "To Ethan," he said, looking straight at his son. "For being a provider. For taking care of his family. Some people get very comfortable living off others." The table went quiet. Ethan shifted in his chair. I felt my face burn, but I forced a small laugh like I didn't know exactly who he meant. Later that night, I sat alone in our room and stared at the folder I kept hidden in my suitcase. Inside were documents I had signed months before we ever moved in. Papers that proved the house wasn't a family home. It wasn't Ethan's parents' property. It wasn't even Ethan's. It was mine. I had bought it through an LLC for a development project that fell through. When Ethan's parents offered it to us, I recognized the address immediately. They had no idea they were offering me my own property. At first, I thought about telling them, clearing everything up. But then I remembered every joke, every look, every comment about me being lucky and dependent. So I decided to wait. Not for revenge. For the truth to matter. The tension in the house didn't explode all at once. It simmered. Little comments turned into arguments. Side eyes turned into full-on confrontations. And somehow, every problem circled back to me. One evening, I came home to find my suitcase sitting by the front door. Not packed neatly. Not carefully. Just dumped there, half-zipped, like someone wanted to make a point. Linda stood in the hallway with her arms crossed. Megan leaned against the wall, scrolling on her phone like this was entertainment. "We've been talking," Linda said, "and we think it might be best if you and Ethan find your own place." I blinked. "What?" "This house isn't meant for long-term guests," Robert added from the living room without even standing up. "A young couple should learn to survive on their own, especially when one of them isn't exactly contributing." My heart started pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "Ethan and I both work. We both help around here. We both." "This isn't about chores, Sophia," Linda cut in. "It's about responsibility. Stability. We don't want Ethan dragged down by someone who's just here for comfort." Ethan walked in right then, grocery bags in his hands. "What's going on?" he asked. Silence. I looked at him, waiting for someone else to explain, but no one did. "They're kicking us out," I said quietly. Linda sighed like I was being dramatic. "We're encouraging you to grow." Ethan dropped the bags. "You can't just throw us out. This is our home." Robert finally stood up.
"No, son.
"This is our home. You live here because we allow it." Something inside me snapped. Not in a loud way. Not in a screaming, dramatic way. In a calm, clear way. I walked past them, past the suitcase, up the stairs, and into our room. I reached into my locked case and pulled out the folder. When I came back down, they were still arguing. Linda was talking. Robert was shaking his head. Ethan looked torn in half. I placed the folder on the coffee table. "Before you decide who gets to stay," I said, my voice steady, "you should probably look at this." They all went quiet. Robert opened it first. His face changed as he scanned the first page. Then the second. Linda leaned in. Megan finally looked up from her phone. "What is this?" Linda asked. I met her eyes. "This," I said, "is the deed to this house." For a second, no one spoke. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Robert flipped through the pages again, slower this time. His hands weren't steady anymore. Linda leaned closer, squinting at the signature line like the words might change if she stared hard enough. "That's not possible," she said. "We've lived here for years." "Yes," I replied softly. "You've lived here, but you never owned it." Ethan looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Sophia, what is she talking about?" I took a breath. "Before we got married, I invested in a property through my company. This house. The development plan fell through, so I held on to it. When your parents offered it to us, I recognized the address." Linda shook her head. "So you tricked us? You moved in just to embarrass us?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "No," I said. "I moved in because I love your son. I stayed quiet because I didn't think ownership mattered. But you made it matter." Robert sat down hard on the couch. The confidence he always carried drained out of him like air from a balloon. Megan whispered, "Wait, so if this is yours?" "Yes," I said. "Then I decide who stays here." Ethan stepped forward. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to be your wife," I said, my voice cracking just a little. "Not your safety net. Not your backup plan. Just your partner." The room filled with something heavy. Regret. Realization. Maybe shame. Linda's voice was smaller now. "We didn't know." "I know," I said. "You didn't ask." I picked up the suitcase from the floor and set it back against the wall. "No one is getting thrown out tonight," I continued. "But things are going to change. This house isn't a place where someone gets judged, inspected, or humiliated. If we're going to live here together, it's with respect." Robert nodded slowly. Not proudly. Not stubbornly. Humbly. Ethan took my hand, squeezing it like he was grounding himself in reality. And for the first time since I moved in, I felt like I was finally standing on my own floor. The next morning, the house felt different. Quieter. Lighter. Like the walls had finally let go of something they'd been holding for a long time. Linda made coffee and actually handed me a cup instead of leaving it at the end of the counter. Robert read the newspaper in the living room, but this time, he looked up when I walked by and gave a small nod. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. Ethan and I sat at the kitchen table, our hands wrapped around warm mugs, just breathing in the calm. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. I smiled. I didn't want power. I just wanted peace. Later that day, I called my lawyer and began the process of transferring the house fully into my personal name instead of the company. Not as a threat, not as a reminder, but as a choice. This wasn't a chessboard anymore. It was our home. A week passed and something surprising happened. Linda asked me about my work. Not in a suspicious way. Not in a judging way. In a curious way. I showed her one of my old projects, a small apartment building I helped develop. She listened. Really listened. Megan even admitted she thought it was kind of cool. Robert started asking Ethan and me for advice on a small investment he was considering. The man who once treated me like a risk now wanted my opinion. But the biggest change wasn't in them. It was in me. I stopped shrinking myself to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. I stopped proving, explaining, defending. I just existed, confident, calm, and certain of my place. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the house, Ethan wrapped his arm around me on the porch. "They really underestimated you," he said. I laughed softly. So did I. This story isn't about owning a house. It's about owning your worth. Sometimes the people who judge you the hardest are the ones who know the least about you. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the cards, not to win, but to finally be seen. My name is Sophia, and this is the day I stopped being the family's gold digger and became the woman they learned to respect. If Sophia's story made you feel something tonight, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps this channel reach more people who love real, powerful stories like this. And if you're new here, subscribe to Revenge Files and turn on the notification bell, because every week we bring you true-style stories about strength, betrayal, and the quiet kind of revenge that changes everything.